nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the housing plan draft discussion. Last week, Kathy Eisman and Taylor Garner from Nelson Pope and Voorhees, our consultants, came in and gave us the presentation they made to the Community Housing Board and the Chafab group. And then last week after they presented it to us, they went back to them with any concerns that the groups had. So I guess today we're going to get the official draft plan. There's I don't know, you're involved, or Kathy, if you're going to run this, or?
I'm Liz Hanley. I'm the chairperson of Chafab. Kathy is going to be presenting our findings in a kind of slideshow. So what you're going to see today, so you saw kind of like the draft of the community input survey and the needs assessment, and then their initial recommendations. So she brought those back to the Chafab board, and we kind of weighed in on just like context and refinement, just to kind of give some finishing touches to kind of the recommendations. So what you're going to see today reflects the input of the Chafab board. So we all put comments on it, and then we met last Thursday for quite a long session. And kind of went through all those notes just to make sure that we were in agreement on what should actually go into the plan. I think there were some terrific insights, so I'm excited for you to see what Kathy put together. So this is kind of like what we're sending to you guys to take from you.
Thanks, Liz. All yours, Kath.
Okay, great. I will share my screen, and Taylor and I are going to go through this.
Thank you.
Meg.
Okay, as Liz mentioned, we're going to go through what is in the housing plan as far as the elements go, and the recommendations that are going to be included, that are included in the housing plan, and then next steps. So the housing plan document, which is being prepared, I mean, we're actually compiling it, has the background and analysis of zoning and environmental constraints that are particular to Shelter Island, a summary of the public input, and the key findings which were provided to you last week, as well as the needs assessment, same thing that was provided last week, the initial findings, and then housing goals and strategies for Shelter Island, both short-term and to long-term, because this is right now, this housing plan is for the next 5 years, and then plan recommendations for implementation. In addition to the Chafab input that we received, we also heard from the town's TDR consultant last week that a TDR program is not feasible for the island, at least at this time, and is being tabled. So therefore, and that's because of the lack of public water supply and very sensitive environment of Shelter Island. So therefore, any community housing, as any other development, will be required to meet Suffolk County Sanitary Code, which is quite strict for Shelter Island. For residents, it's 1 acre, basically 40,000 square feet for a house. So, but that could include an accessory unit if there's an adequate sanitary system and water supply, meaning even if it is a well, it just has to pass the certification test. We also received some input from the town board last week, and then of course the Community Housing Fund Advisory Board, the Chafab, provided their goals and recommendations, which we worked on this weekend and pulled together for this presentation today. The goals are, these are the big time goals to provide, and there are 8 of them. So there's 2 slides: to provide affordable housing opportunities for all islanders at economic levels not currently provided for by the housing market. Second one, create quality housing that aligns with the architectural context and heritage of the island. Number 3, build and design housing following best practices and principles of sustainable building design and site development, minimizing impact upon the natural resources of the island. Number 4, develop, sell, and manage housing projects in a manner that fully respects our residents. Number 5, provide a variety of housing types and options that remain affordable in perpetuity. 6, mitigate population loss and grow the percentage of year-round resident workers in all fields, including teachers, first responders, and essential service providers. 7, increase the overall percentage of year-round residents on the island to support the vitality of our community, the availability of retail services in the off-season, and support the year-round island businesses. And number 8, develop housing that contributes to smart growth initiatives, enhancing the livability and vitality of Shelter Island, i.e., locate development in areas where transportation, infrastructure, and resources are already present. So this next phase, Taylor is going to present the implementation strategies. So take it away, Taylor.
Hi, everyone. So these strategies, they're kind of like a roadmap for the longer term vision of community housing. They're based on feedback we received from the community during our survey and open houses, the demographic trends, and the analysis of zoning and environmental constraints that we've been doing. We've divided these into a few different categories. So we have the short term, medium term, long term, as well as ongoing initiatives. And then you'll see in the next section how these strategies are supported by the recommendations that Kathy will go over after this. So starting with the short-term strategies, these are things that can start now. As we learn from the community, the focus should start off on rentals rather than for sale housing. And based on what we've learned about the TDRs, any rentals will have to comply with the Suffolk County Sanitary Code. And for the immediate term, the focus would be on properties owned by the town. In addition to implementing new rentals, there also is an interest in increasing year-round ADUs or accessory dwelling units, both through code enforcement and amendments. Hand in hand with these rentals, you would need someone to manage them. And what we've heard is that it should be done by an entity other than the town. So there's a few different ways that this could look, which I'll get into on the next slide. But this also lists the types of responsibilities that this management entity would have. So they would be, maintaining the lottery, checking that the applicants are eligible, rent collection, maintenance of the units. And then finally, an education and outreach component that could start now about expanding the list of people interested in community housing and creating resources such as a homeowner's guide to ADUs. Next, we have our ongoing strategies. So the first one is researching partnerships for management. So this could be nonprofits, housing organizations, housing authorities of nearby towns. As you'll see in the second box, there are also some other options that the town could look into, but would be a bit more longer term to get those kinds of ideas up and running. Something like a community land trust or working with Habitat for Humanity. The next strategy is related to additional outreach needed with the senior population specifically. We know from the needs assessment that this age group is growing. However, we felt that a more targeted outreach focusing on their needs would be needed before community housing would be provided specifically for them. And then the last idea for ongoing is to implement creative solutions. So such as donating buildings, either the entire home could be relocated or reuse of some of the materials, design standards for community housing. And we have more details about what would be included in those design standards and the recommendations. And then finally, other funding sources and incentives. The midterm strategies, so looking at starting in about 5 years, two main components. So continue to explore expanding rentals. So if infrastructure became available, it might be possible to add a few more units to other projects on town-owned properties that would be completed prior to this phase. If infrastructure is not available, then that would be off the table. And based on the public outreach, apartments over stores and offices was very popular. Although there's limited opportunity for them, it's something to continue exploring over time. And then the other major goal would be to expand from just a rental model to potentially adding some for sale units to the community housing inventory. And then finally, we have our even longer term goals. So at some point, it will be less feasible to create new housing due to the availability of appropriate town-owned land. And at that time, the fund and priorities can move towards things such as low interest loans and housing counseling services.
Thanks, Taylor. The next slide is the appropriate recommended fund uses for the housing plan for the next 5 years. So the construction of housing for rent on town-owned land, which meets the current density requirements of Suffolk County Sanitary Code. That is, the two projects that are have been under consideration for a while or being looked into on North and South Ferry Road. The fund uses can be applied towards the planning, engineering, development of those properties. Support accessory dwelling units. That as far as the fund goes, the planning end of things is the best part of this. It may make sense to have a very clear guide to where you can have an accessory dwelling unit and where you can't, possible designs that are appropriate, and where does the Suffolk County guidance memorandum come in, where the density required for an apartment is included with the single family home. And that is, we're looking into it, but it does seem that that applies for accessory units that are within the home. Other fund uses related, purchase of land or buildings for community housing. And again, focusing on rentals, rehabilitation of existing buildings for rental units, and then the associated planning, engineering, and design costs. Housing counseling services is included in there. It's it's a catch-all for counseling. So that is another recommended fund use. So for each of the strategies, there's related recommendations that, and some of this is just complete repeat, focus on planning and implementation of rental projects on the town-owned properties being the first. And then selecting a management agency. There will be some research involved to identify the best option for the town and for that number of units that are being proposed. We might not have as many options. There may be one option. I don't know. That has to be researched. But that agency would be required to oversee the fund, make sure that all the revenues received from rentals and so forth are deposited back in the fund, and to follow the standards of the Peconic Region Community Housing Fund Act. The next recommendation is to establish a process for evaluation and approval. Maintaining the CHFAB or supplementing the Community Housing Board with residents that are representative of related fields. Some of those individuals are on the Community Housing Board. Might want to expand that board or make sure that possibly have someone from the architectural field involved. So just a thought to actually have more people that are involved with the housing market involved with the evaluation and recommendations to the town board. There would be a standard review process that accomplishes the following, requiring that any housing project comply with health department regulations, town zoning, and established design standards that are included in the plan, and to require a public hearing. Continuing outreach, again, developing a homeowner's guide to ADUs is one of those. Supplementing the input received to better understand the needs of the growing senior population for future consideration, and also publicizing the message that the town is looking to update the housing register list to understand better the need for community housing. Again, updating the housing plan, and that would reflect changes that occur through the first 5 years of the program, and what you hear back and how it goes, and ongoing outreach. And then, of course, updated demographic data that will become available in the future. Legislative actions are related to accessory dwelling units as well. And then design standards is a lot of discussion about making sure that any project is done in such a way that is architecturally sensitive and also a low impact design, to make sure that any development would fit within the context. So requiring low impact design landscaping to reduce or eliminate the need for irrigation and lowering maintenance costs. Including native species and plant species that provide other benefits, habitat, and attract pollinators. Require innovative design to incorporate sustainability features as practicable, but not limited to including but not limited to locally sourced materials, reuse of building materials from salvaged buildings, energy saving and water reducing fixtures, and other features consistent with the town's climate smart community goals. Requiring that the architecture be designed to fit in with the local character. And then finally, requiring incorporation of features for the safety and well-being of the inhabitants, lighting, orientation of entrances for visibility. So the next steps, we will be finalizing the draft housing plan and working with the CHFAB to make sure we can put it forth to the town board and posting it on the town website before September 27th, aiming for Friday the 23rd. So that way there's a little bit of time over the weekend and plus the Monday. Scheduling the public hearing on September 27th. So there'll be still time, for the public to review the document before the public hearing, which will be 2 weeks later on October 11th. So that's the end of our presentation, and we'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much. Questions from the town board?
Kathy?
Yeah.
Hi, it's BJ. I just have this one question on I guess it's close to it's the first, second, third, fourth slide. Community Housing Fund Advisory Board Housing Plan Goals. First point, to provide affordable housing opportunities for all islanders. I'm not sure about all. Just islanders. I don't know, all. No? That's ambitious.
Expand on it.
It's ambitious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys talk about that word?
Yeah, so, listen, so I can just kind of tell, I think we're a little flexible in the wording, but like the intention is to serve. And when we kind of say islanders, what we're thinking about is we're thinking about folks that live and work here on the island. Yeah. That's who we really mean it to serve. So if there's a different turn of phrase that can better express that, I think that's great. But just so you know, that's the board's intention.
I just think the goal of all might be difficult.
Well, I think that's
the goal.
kind of open to all ages and graphics.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see.
it's not excluding a specific group.
Yeah, we wanted to
Okay.
make it expansive, just because, it's one of the things that has really come up was just like young folks, young families, they're often like our volunteers, our first responders, like they're all, so that's really who my gut will be the majority of who we're addressing with this kind of rentals. Obviously open to everybody, but knowing, keeping in mind that we also need to dive deeper and to figure out how to address like our seniors' needs, and what if there's other communities that we like haven't even really
Focus.
thought of, you know, like that in
Just
5 years
people
when we
in
get
their
updates
50s
from plans. So,
you know.
like I said, we wanted to make it expansive, but open to other turns of phrase, but that was just like our intention.
So wall doesn't mean everybody in need, it means.
A wide swath. Yeah, I just, again,
It's not every.
yeah,
Alright.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, like I'm cool with housing.
Yeah.
Like I'm sad, you know, but, you know, but for those people that, yeah.
thanks.
It would also, because one of the things that have to be incorporated into the plan has to provide for the equitable distribution of community housing opportunities among all the communities of the town. So that reference to all is good.
Right,
for that
right.
purpose as
I
well.
get you.
Yep.
I have a question on that same slide. The fourth one, it says, develop, sell, and manage housing projects in a manner that fully respects our residents. I would love to see the word lease in there, because to me, when I saw that, it was just like develop, sell, where's the rentals involved in that goal? So I don't know how you can incorporate it, but I would like to see the term lease somewhere in there.
Thank you.
Could we just be manage community housing in a manner that fully respects? You know, manage community housing in a
But
manner,
like, again, in the,
in whatever form it takes.
I would just like, because one of the major, inputs from the community was that they want leasing and rentals, and these are our goals, and I don't see the word lease or rental in the goals. So I'd like, that's just my recommendation, that word be.
That makes sense to me.
Jim?
No, I enjoyed the presentation. I thought it was very informative. A second goal when it comes to architectural context and heritage of the island, since our initial view is on, along Route 114, it seems to be, a comment that I keep hearing, now you're going to put affordable housing on, it's already a mess. So, I would think the concept, it's an important goal. And I think it needs to be stressed to people that this is an attempt to upgrade the look of 114 by putting something on there in the form of community housing that is attractive and fits in well with the surrounding areas. That's not the only thing that's going to take care of 114, by the way, 2 or 3 projects of housing. It's part of a greater thing. We talk about the downtown beautification of Shelter Island. It has to be incorporated in the upgrading of stores, vacant stores, and a host of other things that need to be done along 114. And I like that goal. I support that goal. I just want to stress that to the community, that this in no way, shape, or form is bringing 114 down. It may be a great seed to bring it back up, to make it more vibrant in the downtown area and force us as a town board to start to really attack 114 in terms of how can we improve the quality of our downtown area. And we can do that through grants and other things. So I support the goal. The reason I'm harping on it is because I just heard so many people give me this negative feedback about Route 114. I think I view it the opposite way. Again, I think it depends on whether you're for or against community housing, who you talk to, because how they word things. But I think it would be an upgrade, a major upgrade.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out, so not only do we have that in the goals, so we've actually included in
That's
here
right.
design standards. So this was really a focus of the board that, like you said, like the intention of, especially if anything that we would potentially build, but also if we were going to rehab, is that it should uplift the area.
Yes.
And it should be, not only should it be appropriate, it should be like great design,
Yes.
both, visually and environmentally. So I just wanted to just kind of point out, that's the reason why we kind of put it in the goal. We put it in the front as our goals, and then you see that we've even expanded on it. Just because, who knows how this is going to get administered. Like, let's say if we talked a lot about bringing in that third party, just to make sure that it's in there so that they know our intention and kind of the path that we want them to follow and how really important that is to us.
You know, it's consistent with our efforts, by the way, in 4 different places. The library across the way, which is upgrading its facility and changed the whole front of it.
Yeah.
And it's a step in the right direction. The 2 oldest buildings on the block here in terms of police headquarters and Justice Hall, the complete rebricking and repointing of that and windows and looking at ADA compliance and an upgrade of those 2 older buildings, which I think is in the community center across the way, which we are in the process and have been for the last year and a half, upgrading the inside of the community center with air conditioning and new windows and insulation and new roof and a whole bunch of new things. And now we'll take care of the outside. We're going to take care of the front. So it's all in an attempt to make 114 a little bit more attractive. And it's a combined effort with a lot of things. It doesn't happen overnight. But where people, I get a little bit annoyed when people just come up to you and say, and you just let 114. I said, well, have you opened your eyes to some of the initiatives that we have done? You know, it's a process and it's been neglected, no doubt about it. And it needs a major look, but we're moving in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Amber, do you have anything?
I think we're headed in the right direction. I look forward to seeing the fully written plan, but I think we've got good goals and.
I do too.
And also this is going to be a living document.
Yes.
So start with this, as we move along, we can make amendments, changes, reviews as needed, but I think we're doing good.
I have a note on the second to last slide. It's implement design standards for community housing. So there's one note in here to reuse salvaged building materials, which sounds great, but is not overly practical in the actual construction of a home. Like you're not going to want to use old windows because they won't have the same energy efficiency. You don't want to use, it's kind of hard to make that sort of a requirement because half the time it's more expensive than actually building from scratch, depending on what you're doing. I mean, if you're taking a whole home, moving it and renovating it, that's one thing. But if you're just trying to like source the lumber off of it, you're better off starting fresh.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the intention there is where possible.
Right.
Where possible and practical.
It's one thing to like reuse sinks and that kind of
Exactly.
thing, but
You know,
yeah.
and I think and really that is the spirit of it and is just like, obviously, you know, I think I can't remember, it's been so long, there's so many pages that are floating around in my mind. But just like we're efficient and practical, but just again, like I said, it was really important for us to like really illustrate our design standards and just the design and environmental impact were so important. That's why we devoted like a whole page just to like making sure we were clear on it. It's cool.
BJ?
No, I'm good.
Anybody in the audience? Michael?
I do, and I understand that you want an audience comments at the end, but I'm going to take this opportunity because I think it's more important to talk comments in conjunction with your comments, make it a dialogue rather than parcel in different places. The thing that we are talking about repeatedly here, everybody shares, is the same emotions and the same intent, I believe, is to do the best for Shelter Island, do the best for community housing. And I'll clarify doing the best for Shelter Island in the context of improving the overall environment and the overall vitality of the community. And we have a plan that speaks intensely to design standards and goals. And we have a good plan, and we've covered it effectively in many areas, but we are missing an opportunity to make the plan as good as it can be and get the plan passed by the community. And the community has asked us, we have only 2 sites that everybody knows where they are. You know, it's not like we're East Hampton and we have a vast array of possibilities. And we're getting asked the same question over and over again. What is it really going to look like? And we have, again, everything is pointing at the architecture and how the this will fit into the context of the community and what it will look like. And with Exhibit 7, we are silent on that issue. Exhibit 7 for the audience is the exhibit that covers what plans are under consideration. And there are two sets of plans.
There are no plans under consideration.
Exhibit 7, there's an.
It's not part of this presentation.
Yeah,
It's not part of this presentation. It was part of the housing plan. The last time
this is the housing plan.
the committee, the FAB was exposed to it.
But this is it.
Well, the version we saw, presentation we saw, had the examples.
I think Michael's.
Okay, but let me finish. Whether was in there and is no longer in there, it is still missing from the plan. And everybody understands, I think, that when you show at this stage of plan development, this stage of design, it's only something under consideration. It's not meant to lock anybody into something, because things will continue to evolve and improve over time. It's only meant to show intentions and to illustrate what is meant by the design goals and what is meant by the overall plan goals. We are missing that opportunity, and the public is asking for it over and over again. Show us what it will look like and show it how it supports a positive improvement to 114. And the assumption is, since we're not showing it, we have shown it periodically, and people that either can't read it because it was so poorly illustrated, or they just, it's not registering, and they're still asking for it.
Michael, my concern is we put out conceptual drawings with ideas of what it could be. From my experience over the years, people are going to say, well, that's not what what you're doing is not what you showed us. And we don't know what the ultimate plan is going to be. So this is a possibility. This is what it could look like. For us to say, this is what we're going to build is not right, because we don't know what we're going to build.
Well, I've said that before, and I'll say it again, and I'll expand on it. Number one is, at this stage of a project, it's a vision. Visual content is a very effective way to communicate. People understand that when you're in conceptual design, anyone who's built a house or built a building understands that things keep evolving, you get additional input, and you make changes. But it also has a design narrative, which in the case of North Ferry Road site, expresses a collateral benefit to the community of linking two open spaces. And it also basically ensures people that 114 in that area will not be adversely affected, will be positively affected by community housing. That's one area, 114, which I would describe as being a little gritty and in need of improvement. You go to Haven's house, it's one of the jewels of the island. We're putting community housing next to one of our major institutional uses on the island, which is an architectural asset designed by a world-class architect. And there's an attitude, whether it be drawings or just this design narrative, that says, this is how we will be good neighbors and support Haven's house. And we're missing the opportunity to communicate that to the public.
This is not the opportunity, though. This plan is not I know you're a member of JFAB, and I get it.
I'm talking not as a member of JFAB.
Oh, well, then you're over your 3 minutes. But I'm not being facetious. I'm not being facetious.
No, Michael, so we welcomed you up to speak
Because
as a
you're
member of
JFAB.
JFAB.
Because you are
Otherwise,
JFAB.
otherwise the public
It's
have to
not
speak.
in here.
Nobody's-
What you're talking about is not in here. That's not what's covered in here.
All right, well, I asked you to look not at, and you know what I will
This is
say.
the topic. This is the agenda item for now. I don't understand.
I don't understand, you don't understand that? I don't understand how administrative procedures can be used to cut off effective and important communications. I'm done.
I just want to weigh in a little bit. I think what you're bringing up, I think the designs that were originally put out there were just talking points, and you've raised a really good point. Like, people have looked at these and said, this is not what we want to do. So when we get closer to actually designing what's going to be, developed, then the important conversations need to take place, because you brought up some good points in the public. So I mean, this is good. It accomplished what we wanted it to do, which is to get people talking about what we want from community housing on Shelter Island. So I think we're all on the same page. I think it's just we're a little bit.
And to Jim's comment over and over again, that community housing on 114, an already deteriorating corridor, an expression of what the island is going to be adversely affected by community housing. That's one belief. And there's another block of voters that are saying, we don't have enough information, know what this is going to look like and feel like. And that's what I'm pointing out, which I think is more important than administrative procedures. You have an opportunity to get this passed and do something good for the island. And you're relying upon what you can prevent from happening rather than what you can do for a betterment.
I'd be more inclined to put what it's not gonna look like.
I know.
Because that's what people are saying, we're gonna have, tenements, we're gonna have high rises. I mean, it's
Are
ridiculous.
you supporting my statement then? Because
I'm
earlier I
supporting
couldn't put this out here because it might not look like this. So if you're inclined to put what it won't look like, put it in the plan.
We don't know what it's gonna look like, Michael. That's my point. We know what it's not gonna look like.
I'm going to feed off of Amber's thing. I think your comments are understandable, and I appreciate them. I think they're timely. I don't know if that was the goal for today, which I don't think it was. It was just part of the plan. I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety that you're feeling about if visual, a design look, even if you don't hold us to the exact final product, but something in a rough phase of kind of what it's going to look like. To me, I'm a visual guy. I respond better to that kind of thing. I also think there's a lot of concern out in the community about this design feature. So when it's the right time, and it's got to be sooner rather than later, November's not that far away, that somewhere along the line, I would personally, I'm just speaking as one member, I would like to see some type of rough design of what's going to look like in each one of those two areas. Again, without holding us to, here's the final product that doesn't quite look, but it's close. It's not going to be these other things that you can imagine. I do think that it would help in terms of trying to get the referendum passed. There's a lot of feedback that I get on the street is also show me where it's going to be built. We've identified these areas. You should know those areas. What is it going to look like? So let's give them a somewhat of a picture of what it's going to look like within the confines of what's acceptable.
You're saying in the plan?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm struggling with as an architect is that I have this label when it comes to design, it's with a big D, which means it's aesthetics and what it will look like. What I'm trying to convey is a design attitude, which talks about how it fits into the environment. And number two, how individual design choices, where you put kitchens, how you orientate buildings, and how you coordinate the buildings with the site has a huge impact on building community. So that's what I'm trying to convey, more than a design appearance. And I can, as an architect, in 1972, probably the biggest thing that impacted my life as an architect was I went to school at Washington University in St. Louis. I watched them blow up Pruitt-Igoe. Pruitt-Igoe was a public housing project which was built with the best set of intentions. And from that, lessons learned, they learned how to design buildings that support community. And I can tell you that that is the most important thing to the success of this project, not the aesthetic appearance, but really these things that were subsequently learned about how building design.
Michael, I 100% agree with that, and that's what we will do. But I think quite clearly what we're hearing from Jim and from the public is they want to know aesthetically what it's going to look like. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay, well, I agree with that comment, but I wanted to just expand
Right.
what we mean by what it will look like is how it will perform and how it will
Yes,
engender
absolutely.
community and also engender security and issues that some of the public is worried about. Well, something like this. When you build a single family house, security is built in because it says this is private property. But when you join people together in a community housing setting, you have the ability to set it up so you still have those same signals and clues if you do it right.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, but what you're saying can't be part of the plan. I mean, it's too involved. This is the next phase of it.
It's a branch of it. Everything that you're talking about is a significant amount of work. It's a significant amount of research. It's a significant amount of public feedback. It's going to be a process to develop what we vision as housing. So I don't think we have the time to actually incorporate that in here. You can outline the process to the development of housing in this plan, but I don't think you can put the actual structural design in the plan at this point in time.
Let's just face it, this was a very rushed proposition.
I have a suggestion, because you have goals and you
Right.
have recommendations. One of the goal is create quality housing that aligns with the architectural context and heritage of the island. And that's a goal. And one of the recommendations is require architecture designed to fit in with the local character. Your theory, which the town board agrees with, why can't you incorporate that theory in with the goal and the recommendation so that is voiced in the plan? Not specifics, but the theory.
And then goal number 8, smart growth initiatives that enhance livability and viability for Shelter Island, located in areas where transportation infrastructure and resources are already a bit present. I mean, that kind of addresses just a couple of little things that you were concerned about in terms of smart growth. And I think, we're as we move forward, I'll go back to Amber's comment from 15 minutes ago, a living document. Document grows as we refine the plan moving forward. I think it's a good, solid plan with solid goals. Needs to be refined, needs to be disseminated, it needs to be visually looked at. And I don't disagree with many of the things that you said here.
This is, again, a draft, though, so what you're saying is very valid. So if you can incorporate that into the plan, at this stage, it'll be there. So the theory that you're discussing, if you can memorialize that in writing and get it over, you can get it over to the, or work directly, you're part of the committee, work directly with our consultants to get that in there. That's important.
I think Jim's comment was also, I hear your comment and I appreciate it because it's going in the direction I'm trying to go in. But Jim's comment touched on the importance of getting this in front of the public in some venue, either in the plan or some other means before vote takes place, so that we can address some of the remaining issues and get the referendum passed.
Well, the town board has discussed having a town hall meeting on community housing, and they're looking to retain potentially a moderator to come in and foster a very robust discussion on the issue in
Maybe
an orderly
mid-October.
way. And that could be a perfect time to,
That sounds great, and I never withhold comments on anything. I would change the word moderator to
Facilitator, that's what it is.
yes, no, yeah, agreed.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody else in the audience here? Anybody else on Zoom?
I have a question, Jerry, if this is the right time. Just to clarify, the community is not voting on this plan. Is that correct?
No.
You're voting on the 0.5% transfer tax in November.
Right.
Great. And then I had one other question, and that's about the architectural requirement. And that has to do, I understand the desire, the very strong desire to, as partly expressed by Mr. Shatkin, to have architectural review of proposals that come before the town. But I wonder if there isn't some places here where this might not work at cross purposes. If I have a designed house that an architect designed that has an apartment included in it, for instance, or that I'm going to slightly modify, add a kitchen to a space that exists, does this indicate that I would need another architect to come in and kind of sign off on that? Is it going to constrain the options? If the town authority were to buy a building that already exists, that's obviously in keeping with the community character, it already exists. Does an architect have to come in and somehow redefine how that fits in the community character? Is it something that's going to be applied broadly to all options, or mostly focused on, like Michael said, how places are used, how they're designed to be adequately used for community, or mostly for new construction? Just a question.
I believe he was referencing new construction with that concept, not renovating existing structures or adding an ADU to your property. I believe his was in reference to new construction.
I do too.
Yeah.
I can.
It's narrow.
From Chafab, I can speak directly to it since we worked on it together. So we're just talking about new construction. So whether that's like wholesale new construction, properties for rent or for sale, I think that the only thing that I could see that would happen is if you were like building an ADU that was like, again, like part of, that was like all new construction, maybe that was separate, I think it would come into it.
Yeah, but then it's private property and it has the same standard as any other development.
Exactly.
So it would be your personal art aesthetic, and it would probably match your house. I mean, you wouldn't want.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I mean, those are the only things, the intention was, again, around, just to make sure that there's a review process for any housing that the town's developing, just so that it's like transparent.
Yeah.
Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
One footnote on this is, I've been reading South Hill's housing plan. A lot of what they say in their housing plan is they're not going to have a fully developed, accepted housing plan by the vote. That they're going to try, their goal is to try to get as much information out as possible about the plan prior to the voting of the referendum in November. I think we're kind of in a similar situation a little bit in terms of trying to get as much information out before the vote, but again,
yeah, I actually did want to speak to that. So, I mean, I think that there is, I just want to speak to the incredible amount of time that this board has put in over a series of months.
Yeah.
So I think that there's sometimes it definitely is frustrating for us to kind of hear this referred to as rushed, because this plan is long in the making.
Yes.
And I will actually just say that I'm not sure how much longer I would have taken. Now, could it have been moved up a couple of weeks? I would love to be doing the public hearings, but it's not that it wasn't there. It's not that there wasn't deep consideration and research on all these issues. And I really am not sure if I were to bring you this document in 6 months, if I would bring you a different document, quite frankly. So I just want to just really clarify that. And then again, this is a guideline. This is a plan. So there's always going to be implementation strategies and guidelines, but this isn't going to tell you where the well is going to be on like any property. Like this is the thing that guides us, and that is in fact what a plan is, which is what we have been charged to develop. So like I said, I think that we're actually miles ahead of Southold. And like I said, it is my belief that if you would have given me another 6 months, I would have brought you something almost the same.
Yeah.
So I do want to kind of say that, just because the amount of work our board members have put in over the last, like 9 months. And even before that, like there's members of the community housing board that are, we are members of Chafab. So, research that we've been doing for a year, more than that, has gone into this. So I think that this actually represents a huge body of knowledge. So-
Yeah, and I think it's important to differentiate between the housing plan, which is this multifaceted, dynamic approach at developing more housing options on the island, and an architectural design. And I think people keep mixing up the two. Actually, building rental housing is a portion of this plan. So to have an architectural design complete before you have this plan is putting the cart before the horse. Because this will outline the proper procedure for developing the housing, for the public hearings. It will lay out the health department requirements. It will lay out what people expect to see in their housing. So I think to create housing architectural designs and then say, now we've developed a plan, is a little backwards, because the plan should drive the design and the locations. So I understand that everybody wants to see what housing is going to look like, but in my mind, the public should have active participation in the development of the design. They should say, we want to see porches, we want to have access to these things, we want to be in an area. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't think that at this point in time, it would be absolutely appropriate to have a complete architectural design, because it hasn't had that vetting, and we haven't had this umbrella plan to work off of and had community consensus on what the people need to see in a development. So, I think that this is going in the proper order of operations. Yes, conceptually, we want to know, is it going to look like a cottage? Is it going to look like, that makes sense to me. However, that can also change with public input.
Yep.
So, I think this is the appropriate order of operations. And I think that if we can hash these out and have the strategies and the implementation plan really well outlined, then you can efficiently move forward.
I totally concur, Meg. And then the other thing I just wanted to kind of bring up, kind of with that, and I feel like we have really thoroughly, and with Michael Strackman's help, tried to articulate what was important to us in design. But I would just say similarly, one of the other things that has come up in here that we haven't talked a lot about is the focus on ADUs. We need to do a guide, we need to do all that. And we're not in the weeds on that, because until we knew that we needed to focus on it, we can't get, you know what I mean?
That's a good illustration.
There's research that has to be done in each section. So, you have the development for building housing and all the research that goes into that. What are the health department requirements? What does the zoning need? How do you want it to look? And then you have accessory dwelling units, which are another animal completely. So you have to look at that. You have to look at the environmental impacts. You have to look at the areas and where it would be appropriate, how to develop them, what is recommended, what are the limitations, what's allowed. So each one is now going to have its own focus later on. This is your umbrella, and that, or I guess you could say a jellyfish. And now you have all these tentacles, and you're gonna have to go down each tentacle and figure out where it ends.
Jellyfishes sting.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah, this
is not an octopus.
This is the broad strokes, right? This is the sketch of what we want.
Right.
This is akin, and
The comp plan.
anybody, comp plan zoning. Comp plan is the broad strokes, and the zoning code is the nitty gritty. And that's also akin to the CPF. The CPF has a plan. It doesn't spell out what the properties have to look like that you're going to purchase aesthetically, but it gives you the broad things to look for, and then, the CPF bases their purchases on that plan. So that's.
And there's opportunity for the public to be heard.
Public hearings are built into this plan.
Yeah. I have a question though for Kathy Taylor and you, Liz. One thing I am surprised that's not in here is a number. Of number of units.
Oh, yeah, and we actually.
In the plan?
Yeah, so we had,
It's in the needs
apologies.
assessment. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically our initial thoughts were 20 to 40.
That's what I thought.
And so Kathy, I think we had talked about, there's pages of notes, but I think we talked about, it's probably a stretch goal. But what did we say, Kathy? It was 10 within 5 years, and then 20 within 10 years. And just to be, I really want to, because people definitely, even among our board, were oh, we're going to build 10 units. No, what we're talking about is making sure that there's at least 10 units of affordable rental options in our registry. So this could happen multiple different ways, and honestly, we'll probably have to try every track. So maybe we're able to build a couple, cool. Maybe we're able to get some landlords to put in ADUs, amazing. And maybe there's even some other thing in here, but it's gonna be a combination approach to get to that number. It's not just like, well, we're gonna build more. What we're really talking about is like, that's our goal, is we wanna get like at least 10. And then, like I said, the board was pretty unanimous and like 10 in 5 years, 20 in 10. And let's see how we do in 5. Maybe we could, the initial need, we estimate to be 20 to 40 units. A lot of us think it's greater than that, which is why we really want to work to expand the registry, but we think that that's something that's a charge that the Community Housing Board needs to take up, and very aware of it. And we think that with kind of more attention to and kind of movement on getting these rentals, that it'll kind of reinvigorate that. So
Yeah. And there's also work to do to get some of this stuff in place. We're going to have to really dig into things and look at them.
yeah, and I mean, again, this is like, we can't deep dive on everything all at once. This is a volunteer board, and although this is a really hard-working board, there is not like infinite time. So this is the template that tells us where to go, like focus here. This is what's important to our community, based on like the data and literally what our community has told us to do. This is a charge.
I think also in context, 20 on an island where 25 properties have structures, mostly houses, 20 over 2,500, that's a pretty small ratio, and frankly, a minuscule impact, if you will.
It's
And
very
20
modest.
equals 2 of the new homes that I've seen while sitting on the board here, in terms of bedroom counts.
Yeah.
So I just think in context, that's a sort of an important number. When people think and get maybe a little frightened of what the impact might be, the impact will be not great,
And again, we talked a lot. We talked.
Why all the effort? It sounds.
You have to come up to the podium.
Well, no.
Well, we have to start somewhere, and currently we have 0 affordable rentals on our registry. That is currently what we have. And so we have to, and we are facing, building is complicated. There are some other just like kind of cultural and enforcement and all sorts of stuff that kind of are working against us with the ADUs. And we wanted to set ourselves, obviously we would love to do more, but we are a volunteer board. We do have finite resources, and even should this proposition pass, we're going to be sitting on a very modest amount of money. So it's important to be realistic.
And,
Well, and I think it's also
Yeah.
our responsibility as a town to have a housing plan established. This should have probably been done years ago, but there needs to be something. We need to have something in writing that, we can work towards. I mean, it, of course, in such a small town, it's not going to be anything crazy. It's not going to be over the top. It's not going to be like what they're looking at in Sag Harbor, but it has to be appropriate for us, but it has to exist in some fashion.
and we didn't know it going in.
That's true.
That's the other thing. Why the effort? Because the effort is to find out. The effort is to do this exploration.
In fairness, in the 93 comprehensive plan and reinforced in the 2008 supposed update,
Yeah, it's been listed.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, and I hope that I'm articulating it for the board, is one of the things where we felt like we wanted to be kind of modest in our initial goals is because we haven't done this in a while, and we actually have never done rentals. Just to be totally frank about it, we've never done it. And so we didn't want to be like, oh my gosh, we're gonna go in and build 30 units, because really, we're gonna learn. And so it would be irresponsible of us to take on a large project with no experience. And so that's, again, that kind of really, I feel like drives our number, is to make sure that we wanna meet the needs, but we also want to be responsible and be good stewards and do this the right way. So that's why you see like bringing in outside help, people that have done this before, starting with a modest goal. And if we do it, you know, if it's really easy, if it's really great, we've kind of figured it out, then we can always revisit it for that 5 to 10 years. But
So just to wrap it up,
yeah, I'm sorry.
it's all right.
I know, wrap it, I'm gonna sit down.
Fab and Nelson Voorhees are gonna finalize everything we've done today and what you've done with your group. And we're gonna have it ready to set the public hearing September 21st.
27th.
27th, okay.
Yeah, that
For
is
the
correct.
11th.
And then it's gonna include all these points, but it's gonna be a much longer written document with less
It
pictures.
will be longer, and so Catherine, so the needs assessment, which showed a need,
Yeah,
that is also gonna be in the plan. I realized today was a
Yeah.
presentation, I just am sort of, you know, in my head,
yeah, so
have
imagine it's
expectations.
gonna be like a Frankenstein, but with lots more words of just like the
What we've
findings.
seen,
Yeah, so
yes.
the last one, which was like basically what we got from the community, the needs assessment, and then this recommendation, so like.
Jellyfish.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I love that.
And sometimes it is There's a reason I picked jellyfish.
It's all gonna be together, but with like a lot more words and less pictures.
Right.
Sounds good. Thank
Liz,
you.
we appreciate your, and the committee's efforts. Thank
And
you.
Kathy and Taylor, thank you very much.
Thank you very,
So
very
just so, just
The gong.
just from the town, we're laughing here because Chris Dioro just walked in, chairman of the housing board. So just so you know where, I think where the town board is coming from, in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're gonna be immersed in the budget, but we're also gonna be, I think we're gonna put ADUs on the top of the agenda so we can start looking at how many we have existing, what's the potential, and what do we need to do to get moving with this? Because ADUs are something that are here, something we can do right now without you know, any funding.
And many are
I think we
already
can start the
being rented.
process.
Many are already being rented out in the
Right.
short-term market.
Right.
So
So we have,
again,
we have
impact.
the whole concept we have to address. Okay. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank
A
you.
robot, it's a.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have Chief Reed is here. Jimmy is the Emergency Management Director for Shelter Island. And
Jerry.
every year we go through,
You want to see Christie?
every year we go through hurricane preparedness. In the winter, if there's a storm coming, we get together for that. So Jimmy's just gonna run us through how he gets all the agencies involved in the town and how prepared we are. Chief?
Thank you, Supervisor. And hurricanes may be easier than affordable housing, which will be really, really kind of interesting. So as the supervisor mentioned, over the last month or so, we've been reviewing our Hurricane Coastal Storm Plan, and we've been reviewing it with mostly our primary participants, which I'll get into in a minute. I just have a quick slideshow that I can kind of walk the board through some of the steps we've taken in preparation for this hurricane season, which doesn't end till the end of November. And luckily, and we all knock on wood, there are no active hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin right now. So that's a real plus for us. And we hope that it stays that way, but it's not for us to be remiss in our planning process for hurricanes should or when we get them. And what I'll say to you is that one of the things that scares me most really is winter storms and or ice storms. You know, many years ago, upstate New York had a really horrific ice storm, which put power out for several weeks in that region. So this plan would be used also in modeling for those type of events. So, you know, the nor'easters we have, the coastal storms, winter storms, you know, hurricane planning, all kind of gets wrapped into this planning model. So with that said, if I can, I'll hopefully share my screen. I'm just going to throw a quick PowerPoint. Hopefully I selected the right one. And just tell me if this display is working right once I click.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, perfect. So anyways, the first slide here is really Hurricane Henri. And really, we as a community didn't get much from this storm. But it's not to say that we didn't plan and execute our plan because it was approaching. Because when you looked at some of the mapping for it, and although we didn't get much impact from it, we had several planning meetings with all of our planning groups, and it's what it takes. Honestly, I kind of enjoy those planning meetings because, especially when we don't get them, because it allows us to flex our plan. I think we invited the press into some of those planning meetings last year. This was last August. But really what it does is it gives us the opportunity to flex our plan, remind everybody what their roles and responsibilities are. And that's a lot of what I did over the last month. So in looking at our all hazards team, obviously we have the police department. We can backslash that if we wanted to say that and call it emergency management. Our headquarters sits as the emergency operations center for the town. Fire departments obviously involved, highway, the supervisor's office, senior services, the rec department, the building department, and the school. Now, I met with all of those groups over the last month. EMS, I didn't really have much to meet with them. I have regular meetings with them. It wasn't an issue. The village, we keep them abreast of what's going on. Both North and South Ferry ferries, we operationally work with them. You know, our role and our goal is to keep them open as much as we can during a storm. And then I have regular discussions with especially electric and not as much telephone. But really, those are our primary participants in our all hazard team, regardless of the nature of the event. Okay, good. All right, so in just looking at it, so the board understands kind of the roles regardless of the storm or event, is that the police department, as I mentioned, sits as our emergency operations center, and we coordinate all our activities out of this building. The fire department in coastal storms and stuff, they coordinate evacuations. All right, they help us to coordinate evacuations. If we decided as a municipality that we needed to evacuate Montclair or Silver Beach or portions thereof, we would rely on the fire department to assist us in that capacity. It doesn't take them away from their primary role of fire service, but that they're in our plan, they coordinate evacuations. The highway department, kind of self-explanatory, also the public works. They, protecting our town buildings, closing the roads, debris cleanup. They have a debris management plan, which Brian is in the process of upgrading and cleaning up that debris on a priority basis. When we have storms coming, we look to see what we have, what's going on at the landfill, the recycling center, to see how much capacity we can handle. Brian has a plan that if needed, if we had a really devastating storm, we may open up Wade's Beach and use that parking lot to handle a certain amount of debris or regionalized debris. So we work with the county on a debris management plan and the state also. So Brian I think Jay did it back in 2016, and we're working on a updated version of that plan. The supervisor's office, which is also connected to the media department now. The supervisor in his office is in charge of all public information. Any information we put out to the public will go through his office. And primarily, he's in charge of the emergency declarations with the town attorney. Senior services, Sarah and her group do a great job. They maintain what we call a frail and elderly list. They make phone calls to those people. They start to develop plans at least 72 hours out from an event, trying to get seniors or elderly to get with maybe neighbors, friends, or family. They also open and manage a special needs shelter down at the basement of our senior center. And we've gone over those plans with Sarah and her group just this past month. The building department, really their role is mostly post-event, looking at structural damage. We do have them charged, and it's kind of a crossover between them and the media department with a photo and videoing pre-event and post-event storm damage, so that we can make the proper claims to FEMA and storm reimbursement. Rec department, largely their role for a hurricane, and I went through this, is supplementing other departments. Once we close our beaches, close our community center, close our fit center, we have employees that could become available to assist other departments, depending on what we have going on, and we would use them, similar to what we did during COVID-19, which utilized some of the framework of this plan, where we had them reassigned to helping the senior services, work with putting out shots, right? Putting out a point of distribution location at the school to get shots out as we did during COVID. The school is our primary shelter. They can generate power the whole school now. It's also a pet-friendly shelter where we have a portion of the building, largely the old industrial arts area or that type of classroom environment where we can put pets in crates, and our animal control officer would assist with that. But our school is our primary shelter. They have emergency food stocks in place that could also assist if we had two shelters going at the same time, the school and the senior special needs shelter. EMS, besides their emergency medical response, we had them help us with doing a shelter training class down at the EMS building in April of this year. We probably had about 25 people there, and a mix of school, town, fire, and senior services all in attendance. And the North and South Ferry is really our transportation hub, and trying to keep them working and open as much and as often as they can. We have, and we've worked at this for a lot of years now through many town boards, maintaining a strong relationship with PSEG. We are one of the few towns that pre-deploys PSEG in our community, pre-event, and it includes small coastal storms and post-event. I kind of pride myself, and I think the town does too, on keeping that relationship open and ongoing, so that we can get the support we need when we need it. But we always remind people that all power outages, I know a lot of times they want to call the police department, but those calls should still go into the PSEG number so they can be properly routed. Generators, we've enhanced our generators throughout the town. We now have them obviously at the town hall complex, the police department, emergency management center, justice hall, our EMS building, highway building, senior services. The community center, we have a grant in right now. We took the old PD generator and we can power part of the community center, but we're looking to upgrade that. So we're in the process, and we hope to receive a grant to do that. And the fire department buildings all have generator power, which is important for us in times of emergency. We're going to really rely on our mass media. I know Christina is, I'm assuming, in the room, and she's a big part of this. Making sure that we get information out on every platform we have, from Channel 22, our website, Code Red, Facebook, and Instagram. We pay an annual subscription to Code Red, which is a text, email, phone blast to our residents. We can isolate if we had to send a message to only Big Ram Island. We could put a circle around Big Ram Island and get everybody in that region and get them a message, especially if the causeways were going to be compromised. And we wanted to tell them, hey, look, you really should get out, but if you stay, you're staying at your own risk. And we've done that before, but pre-event, we really rely on mass media and our many ways to get that message out to people. And we went over that during our most recent meetings. I just wanted to touch lightly on our comprehensive emergency management plan. We have developed and worked with Suffolk County, the other 10 towns, the New York State Office of Emergency Management, and FEMA to develop a town comprehensive emergency management plan. The board has adopted that plan via resolution, and the coastal storm plan, the hurricane coastal storm plan, sits as an appendix to that comprehensive emergency management plan. But regardless of the emergency, each person, if you take the supervisor, for example, would have the same role. Whether it was some other kind of major event, if we had a plane crash somewhere on the island and there were a lot of victims, the supervisor would be in charge of declaring an Article 2B emergency declaration if needed, and putting out media information, right? So all of our roles kind of stay the same. We just morph them into the emergency that's going on. I always remind the community to kind of be prepared. We ask people to plan, especially during hurricane season now, to be prepared to go 3 to 5 days without power outages. Power outage is really what we hear the most from people on. Their power's out. When is it going to come back? We remind people that they really should be prepared to go 3 to 5 days. And if you looked at Sandy and Irene, that fit in perfectly to that. I would say we had probably 80% of the island up in 3 days and the whole island back up in 5. But, to do that, you have to do some pre-planning on your own. This is one page of a trifold document that we have in town hall at that media desk. We share it on our website, and it's just really some basic information on how to prepare for a storm from our local perspective. This is the second page to that document. Whether you're looking at water supplies, food supplies, flashlights, radios. If all of that fancy media that we have goes down, we may be relying on local radio to get the message out to our community. So this is a good guide. Also on our town website, under the Police Department Emergency Preparedness, you can find links to FEMA, Red Cross, Department of Homeland Security, all of those places. They all have different guidance documents for how to be prepared as a community, how to be prepared as a person. And it's why we developed that SEM plan and why we developed this Hurricane Coastal Storm Plan. And that's pretty much all I had in a recap of that. Supervisor, I think, and I know you were in on one of the meetings as many of the other primary participants. Was there anything else that you felt I should have covered that I may have covered?
You covered it, but you kind of glanced over it. And I just want to say, over the years, the chief has nurtured some relationships with the county emergency services, with the state police, with the sheriff's office, and most importantly, with PSE&G. So after one of our major storms, when there was outcries all over the island that PSE&G needed to be shut down, they were terrible. I have to be honest, I wrote a letter saying how great they were to Shelter Island. I mean, they were here before the storm, they stayed during the storm, and they remained until everything was done. So a lot of that has to do, again, with Jimmy's relationship with these groups. I think
tree trimming has been used,
Yeah.
preventative measures.
Right.
Jim.
So that's all I wanted to say, Jim.
Jim, sort of, we've all been exposed to weaknesses in the supply chain. And has that changed in any way, that fact, how you prepare?
Yeah, so BJ, one of the things that I'm always concerned about is our food supply. And when I met with Dr. Dolger and his staff during this preparation period, I asked him, because we run an emergency worker shelter and food supply at the firehouse. We could have one at the senior services and one at the school, and they feel that the school's food reserves would be pretty strong to support the community for a period of time. I agree with you that supply chain issues could be there, but food supply is one of the biggest issues that I would be concerned with during this time. So is that where you were going, or were you looking at a different supply chain issue?
I'm also thinking, if you have a sort of an East Coast event, whatever portion of the East Coast, hundreds of miles, you really could see a week's worth of delay in terms of getting new supplies, food mostly, but also I guess first aid, we're pretty good on that, on all your first aid equipment and supplies. So I guess it would be mostly food and maybe fuel for running those generators. I don't know.
Yeah, no, so we definitely look at that, and Highway does a really good job at making sure they're all fueled up pre-event. Also, we have our own fuel supply at the highway yard, so that does help us there considerably to restock those if needed.
Great. Jimmy, one of the other things I can remember for a couple of years in the late 80s, early 90s, every year we had a storm of the century. And one time we were out without power for eight or 9 days. All our facilities that you mentioned have generators, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The only one, and so our community center now is a post-storm shelter. We also have it identified as a point of distribution location. So if we had to supply people with water and some meals and stuff like that, we would use that location post-event. The building wasn't rated strong enough to use it as an actual shelter pre-event. But that is the only building right now that we're looking to enhance the generator on. It has a small generator that can provide some power, but we'd like to enhance that. And we have that grant in through Jen Messiano's office, trying to attain that generator.
Great. Anybody else, anything?
No, good.
Any questions from the audience?
Good job, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, chief.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, that's it for the actual, oh, no, I'm sorry. Please.
We got Tim.
I'm sitting here the whole time. Next on the agenda, sorry, Tim. Tim Patel is, he's the chair of the Green Committee, but he's also an important member of CPF. And I like to refer to Tim as a purist. And he's going to discuss West Neck Preserve and what his plans are for what his proposal is.
So Gordon, just one quick question. When was this property purchased?
2020.
2020, at the end of the year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mid-year.
Mid-year, okay. So I'm Tim Patel, a member of the Community Preservation Fund Committee, and I'm here to talk about the revegetation / restoration of the West Neck Preserve, which is a Nostrand Parkway and West Neck, thank you. That's the name. Christina, we're probably going to go through these fairly quickly, so you can go to the next slide, unless there's a way I can do it. So this is a photograph that was taken, I don't know, sometime in the 30s, and it shows in the brown area, particularly to the right of that LA of trees with the house in it. That's the area that we're talking about. At that time it was empty, if only it was still that way now. And then
It was the road that ran through it, right, Jim, to the left? That's the road that still exists. Right, correct.
So the area that we're talking about revegetating is actually to the right of that road, starting on the road going towards West Neck. Next slide, please. And so what was there at the time of the purchase was there was a mowed area in the center which had the remnants of a Christmas tree farm. The Christmas trees are still there. And then it was surrounded by, and you can just keep going, Christina. Actually, this is a film that Gordon made. I don't know how to make it run.
There's about 65 of those evergreens, those pines on there.
Anyway, you get the idea. There's a mowed area and it's surrounded by a lot of stuff. So, the property had and still has a lot of invasive plants. The usual suspects. We can go to the next slide. We go through this fairly quickly. This is Oriental bittersweet, which was climbing up the trees. Multiflora rose, also climbing up the trees. Those are the berries of the multiflora rose, which the birds eat and spread around. This is porcelain vine. There was actually a lot of porcelain vine, which actually climbed on a lot of the black locust trees. More than I've ever seen anywhere. And finally, this is one of my favorites, mugwort, which is quite obvious there right now.
Yes.
So there was a lot of junk there. So the highway department cleared most of the property. We can go through these quickly. So this is looking from the corner of Nostrand and West Neck. You can see the locust trees that are there. Those are the trees. They're all pretty much locust trees in the property. That's the Christmas tree farm. And you can keep going, Christina. Brian put down a temporary parking lot there, and there's a sign. One thing about the trees is they were so covered with vines that they were actually being supported by them. So once you took the vines off, the trees in many cases did not have a lot of support. And so since the property was cleared, we've been losing gradually some of those black locust trees. And as we all know, black locust trees tend to be shallow rooted. They go over sometimes in storms. They also drop a lot of branches. So one of the things I think over time, I would certainly like to see, but this is not my decision alone, is that a gradual replacement of many of the locust trees with oaks and other species, plus some understory trees. So to actually revegetate this property was way beyond my scope. So we sent out an RFP to a bunch of firms who deal with habitat restoration or ecological restoration. And we heard back from 4 of them, and they were all pretty much in agreement on how they would, in the proposals, what they would actually do. And so the first thing they would do is a site inventory and analysis of the property. Would be conducted noting the location of native, alien, and invasive vegetation. The analysis would also note insect, bird, and mammal species that are apparent at the time, soil types, and topography. And then they would take this map and use it to create a conceptual plan for how to revegetate the property. And we go to the next slide. So a conceptual plan would be put together that would include the location of a parking area, which is sort of there already. Paths, actually Brian started using the mulch that is there to lay out some paths. It's not complete yet. Potential ADA areas, and a planting design that could be installed over a multi-year period. So obviously revegetating a 5-acre piece of property in 1 or 2 years is quite an expensive proposition. But the idea of having a multi-year plan is that you would know that you're going to take section A 1 year, and then you're going to go to section B the next year or 2 years later, depending on how much you want to spend or not spend. And you sort of revegetate the property that way. And meanwhile, you're also going to have to keep track of the invasive stuff and control that at the same time. So when they come up with a conceptual plan, then they present it to the committee and any other interested parties. And there's a back and forth about perhaps the species that go there, or why not have, I don't know, I can't figure out right now what you do, but it's like you're trying with the housing plan. There's sort of a back and forth of ideas. And then you finally come up with a final plan, and that's the one you actually start executing over time. So the proposals, last thing, and this is very important, is a long-term management plan. So that I'm here now, that not to be morbid, but I may not be here in 20 years or 30 years. But the idea is to come up with a management plan in a book form or some kind of form that anybody could pick it up 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, and figure out what they need to keep doing to keep that property in shape, either in terms of controlling invasives or for future planting, or just plant maintenance of the plants that are there. And that's actually a very important component. Now, some of the proposals also propose other different sort of extra things, which we may or may not use, such as outreach to the public. They also offer services to reach out to nurseries. We would be using wholesale nurseries and paying wholesale prices for material. They could help arrange for that. I think in terms of the actual planting, we either can work with Brian or we can work with other island nurseries to do that. And also there are many people who have come forward and said they'd like to volunteer. So with oversight, a lot of these plants will not be that big. Certainly volunteers can help plant things also, as well as ongoing weeding or other kinds of projects that we might need. Another component that has been talked about at the site is having 1 or more meadows at the corner of West Neck and West Neck, where the yield sign is. There was concern about having lower vegetation there so that people can actually see over it. And just go back one slide, Christina. So the idea would be, go back, one more back. There we go. Okay, so the idea would be to have a native meadow there, which would be comprised mostly of native grasses, and then how many flowering perennials you put in there is really, it's almost like a formula. You just decide what you want to do or not do, or you add them over time. But you essentially start with a couple of grasses just to get them going, hold the soil and repress any weeds that might still be in the soil when I come up. Okay, now you can go through these. So this is actually at my house. That's all butterfly weed. So there's a guy up in Connecticut who, probably not going to be hiring, but he does very high-end meadows for mostly homeowners and institutions of 40 acres or more. And this just gives you an idea of what certain types of meadows can look like. You just go through these. This may be in the fall season.
Tim, at that point, when a meadow looks like that, how much maintenance is involved in that?
Very little. I'll get to that in a minute. Just go back one slide, Christina. I just want to make a comment about this slide. One thing a meadow will not be is something like this, which is a meadow in a can.
I was going to say, I've seen that.
It's very pretty for one season, and that's going to be about it.
Right.
It uses mostly annuals like bachelor buttons and coreopsis and
Poppies in there, yeah.
Yeah, and they're very pretty.
Cosmos.
Cosmos, yes, and they're lovely, but people think that they're going to come back every year and they don't, and also they're mostly not native. And I think the point of this project would be to try to keep it really a native type project. Your question was about maintenance. So once
it's established like that.
Once a meadow is established, it's just a mowing cycle.
Oh.
And you tend not to mow it in the fall because meadows actually have a real supply coverage for birds, seeds for birds and other animals.
Yeah.
So you wait until probably like late February to mow it. But it also depends as you're establishing it. This is something I'm not an expert on. But you also have specific mowing schedules when you actually are sort of starting a meadow going, so that you're encouraging the good grass and repressing the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And it has to do with sort of the height and the timing of when things grow and the speed at which they grow. But that again is why I think we need expert advice.
Yeah.
So going forward, the benefits of this project, aside from restoring a very degraded habitat, and replacing all those bad plants with native vegetation that will provide innumerable wildlife benefits, this project can also serve as a model for other shoulder island preserves, which also need help from invasives and restoration. It will also provide educational opportunities for the school. I would love to get the school involved. They have a science class, they have an environmental class. And it'd be great to get them involved in sort of assembling data of what returns to this area as it gets more and more developed. And finally, most important, it would be a great place to visit and enjoy. And moving on, next slide. So doing something like this is not entirely sort of alien to the island. If we go through these slides, Christina, at Bashambek Preserve, of course, we have a big field, which they spent a lot of time restoring over the years to attract bluebirds and other birds.
It's the North Meadow, yeah.
Yes. There's Bunker City County Park, which is sort of a coastal area, but it has a lovely combination of beach grasses. It's in the fall. You've got seaside goldenrod. There's even a closer view. You've got beach pea, and here you've got goldenrod, and then you've got the next slide here a bee. Getting as much as it can. That's blue stem grass, and that's the groundsel seed heads of groundsel bush, which are so prominent at the causeway. And then, of course, the prickly pear. And then Crab Creek Preserve, which already has a meadow, actually. It was quite beautiful last year. There again, bees enjoying some goldenrod. And this is further towards the creek. We have a beautiful area of oak trees, and there's a wonderful understory of
Bayberry.
bayberry and huckleberry. It's really a wonderful place. And then this was something I discovered when I was photographing one day, a native geranium on the outskirts. Gardens Creek Preserve, which is mostly mowed, but last year had wonderful areas of butterfly weed growing. Cackle Hill Preserve, the very entrance of the preserve, we have the Aurelia. And then some of the things that we might be wanting to replace it with are some of our native shrubs that are also deer unfriendly, such as bayberry. And you can go through this quickly. Bayberry berries, that's sweet fern, which is a bayberry relative. That's red cedar berries. Some oak trees would be nice. Shadbush trees, which are nice understory trees, and they have berries. And beach plums, which are wonderful. That's in my house. And beach plums. And then flowering dogwood. And the whole point of having a meadow and trying to sort of restore all of this is really to provide food for animals, and particularly insects which are in trouble. Or be it native bumblebees are in trouble, and many other species are in trouble. So this is butterfly weed, butterfly, bees, monarch butterflies, which will only lay their eggs on milkweed plants. There's a larvae there on one of my butterfly weeds. That's a milkweed beetle. A bee on mountain mint, which is not the same as catmint. It's a wonderful native plant, which would be great in the meadow. The last slide was a sweat bee. So I have a prickly pear cactus. Dragonflies, always a good sign. You see dragonflies, I always feel like you've got a healthy habitat. Luna moths, which we rarely see. And then when you have insects, you attract birds. So the goal would be to also boost the bird population. And we have a box turtle, which is always wonderful to see on Shelter Island. Finally, even squirrels, one of our, probably the second least favorite mammal on Shelter Island after deer, but I have a particular fondness for them.
And they're adorable.
Oh, they ate my
It would also
tomatoes.
provide a habitat for the quail.
Yes, and quail. So it will provide habitat actually for a lot of creatures, so the question is, because people were upset when all that foliage was taken down, and the question, why, what's the difference? There actually is a difference, because native plants, and there have been several books written about this, native plants actually have been evolved in this area with particular insects and animals, and they actually provide more nutrients and food for insects in particular. Birds seem less fussy. So you're actually creating a more robust and a more
Inviting.
Hardy too. It's a hardier.
Yeah, and it's a more profound habitat that you're providing for all these creatures. And also, it's a sense of place. These would be plants that are native to an island, so when you walk through it, you really get a sense of this is what should be on our island. And unfortunately, we're losing more and more of, because we didn't have lawns, roads, or parking lots. Mugwort would cover the whole island.
So Tim, on the eastern box turtle, which people are frantic about, where anytime you mow, but you're talking about mowing in late February, they're still in hibernation.
Yes.
So just describe for the public what that might look like with the eastern box turtle. Would they be located, and would it be safe to mow at that particular time?
Well, we can certainly consult with, there's a turtle organization, South Fork, and they've actually come to your property and help you locate turtle where they are underground, to make sure if you're doing any kind of construction, that you don't damage them. But my understanding is, and it's always been my even where I live, that the turtles are dormant usually till early May, depending on, so they're underground. But for instance, I was at West Neck yesterday, and the mugwort is fairly robust, has some other vegetation. And so rather than mow it all flat, I would vote for topping it right now. So at least the plants that are blooming that we don't want won't go to seed and spread more. And that way you're not damaging any brown birds, turtles, and any other creatures that are in there right now. So yes, it's a double thing. One is you're not harming animals that are in there by mowing early, but then when you do mow, most of them are dormant or not there.
Yeah, we did that at Silver Beach. We didn't hire, they came for nothing on a Saturday morning. Unfortunately, it's cold, nasty, rainy morning, and the box turtles, we found one the first 45 seconds we were in there, and boxed it, and put it back after it was mowed. But unfortunately, because of the weather, if you're going on a nice May day, you know, it's a little warmer and they're up and around, you can spot them a lot easier. The dogs found them very quickly.
Yeah.
You know, and you can relocate them. Actually, you take them off, you flag it, and you mow it, and then you take them that turtle right back to the same flag area, and you drop it down, and everybody's hunky-dory, you know, as far as that's concerned. But it involves a little effort. And the other thing I would suggest is if we do that, the people that are concerned about Easter box turtles and other such critters, that you ask for volunteers to come out and surely get 20 people on a Saturday morning to walk a field along with these, you know, other dogs and sense, you know, to try to locate them and to minimize any loss of life to have, you know, to these animals, you know, so that would be something that, you know, we would be more than happy to, you know, spearhead and do. I know plenty of people want to do that.
But mostly if you do it, you know, earlier, not after the season,
Right.
you're
not an issue.
fairly
Yes.
safe.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you also went into the range of what.
That's gonna be my next question.
these proposals were. So I would say the low range was in, and again, this is for the plans only. We're not covering plans.
Implementation, just
Not
design.
implementation. It's planning only, and this is sort of the basic services they're offering. For instance, I'm leaving out outreach and some other things they could offer, but that could be sort of discussed later if needed. So the low range is about like 13,000 up to about 36,000. So you've got 4 proposals and there's a low range and a higher range.
You're in the mid-20s on the average.
I know they all apples to apples.
Pretty much. I actually created a cheat sheet for you, which I sent to Christina. And you can also see, send her the actual proposals, which is actually worth looking at because they're all slightly different just in their presentation. But I would have to say that when you break it down to the essentials, they all cover the exact same things, which are those three tasks that I showed you.
So how do you envision, once we get a plan for the place, you know, you gonna do it in sectors or, you know?
It would be done in sectors because again, you can't, unless you're a multi-millionaire.
Right.
You really can't install 5 acres of plants.
Let me ask you this, if we move forward and we decided to renovate something, can we cut the rest of it in the meantime? We're getting a lot of complaints.
Yeah. No, I understand that. No, absolutely. No, because part of it is you're going to, they'll do the inventory, figure out what's growing there, and then they're going to figure out how to start dealing with some of that really bad stuff. And so while you're, you know, hopefully creating some space, I don't know how big, because I'm not.
Whatever they can do, can they do a quarter at a time?
You start planning something,
Yeah.
but meanwhile, you can't just let the rest of it.
Right.
You have to aggressively.
No,
Yeah.
you really have a maintenance program for controlling.
Because the mugwort there is like on steroids.
Yes, it is. I have no idea why.
Yeah.
Because it's not competing with anything.
No,
Fresh turn
no, I
soil
was
and
able to pull it out very easily, but you know, that's not.
dry.
It's wet, it gets stronger.
Yeah, anyway, but yes, no, it's not gonna just go because that's gonna be counterproductive because then all that's gonna be seeding while you're
Right.
trying to create something
Right.
new. And, or it doesn't have that stuff.
Right. So Tim, you and I have had a discussion that this would be a great example for the rest of our
Yes.
programs. Because one of my concerns is, you know, we have the lima bean farm, we have the old nursery property, that basically everything's dead because of the overgrowth. So it'd be nice if can show, and again, when we cleared West Neck, everybody went wild that, you know, what did you do? But we took out all the invasives. And now you're gonna show what it should be. So if we can get this done, I think it'll be a lot easier going forward to restore the other, you know, in the public eye, to restore the other part.
It will. And again, I think we'll learn a lot from this. You know, it's gonna be, I think, a bit challenging. So with the other preserves that have issues, but we need to start addressing those. Because otherwise they're just going to become complete, taken over.
Yeah.
And, you know, people, a lot of people, and this is not, it's just I happen to know about plants, so I read a landscape differently than most people. So, and you do too, probably because you know what's invasive and what isn't. So when I go to some place like Crab Creek, and I really, really appreciate how beautiful the native environment is. And so, you know, it'd be helpful to sort of educate the public about this is what we're really going for. This is what we really want the island to be more of. And I think it'd be great if homeowners could sort of pick up on this and start doing
That's
something.
what I was gonna bring up. It would be a model for homeowners.
Yes.
You know, it really would. It's aesthetically pleasing, it's easy on, you know, it saves you money in the long run. You know, you're not concerned with grass anymore,
Or irrigation, you don't need.
Yes. And that's the other thing. I mean, a lot of the plants that I envision going there, I have a couple of plants in my yard that I can water all summer. They're blooming beautifully right now. They went through the needs of drought, and they're native to Long Island. So you have plants like that, and people say, "Oh, I could have that in my yard."
Yeah.
Take out 20 feet of lawn and put like this. So I think it's sort of could be a model for homeowners.
Does Brian feel that some of that black locust that, you know, again, it's not rooted well, and after every windstorm, you usually see one of them, they're a little top heavy now because they've been trimmed up. So they, you know, you lose one a month, you know, it seems like falls over in there from a little bit of a storm. If we have any major storms, you'd lose quite a few of them in there. So I think Brian, you know, it wouldn't take much to topple these things, you know, to get them out of the ground totally, you know.
Yeah.
Section by section.
Yes, because my thinking was there was already a shock to the public, so.
Yeah. No, we're talking about the section.
Progression, not a Band-Aid.
Divide that property, that's 5 acres up into acres over a 5-year period.
Yes.
It's a fifth, a fifth, a fifth, a fifth.
It's a replacement process.
Correct, that's
What do
exactly
you think
what
of
we're
like the
talking
Christmas
about.
tree lottery? What are you gonna do about the trees?
Well, one thing I'd like to do is, several years ago, Friends of Trees planted some evergreens along Shore Road.
Yes.
And some of them didn't make it. And part of the point was that when they grow up, it would keep golf balls from flying across the street into people's houses,
Yeah.
which I didn't believe happened, but it actually does. I've seen the evidence of the holes in the actual asbestos.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if we could take some of those and put them along that road to a place.
I think the intent was to relocate
Relocate them, yeah.
town properties.
Yeah, and they're too close together.
Yeah, the only problem was that I don't think we watered them, you know, once we planted those, because they went pretty, you know, and those trees that line that road right there, going up the hill, they're in bad shape. I mean, you can see them. I mean, they're buying time.
Yes, I know.
The big trees, plus their pines between the two fairways there, they're snapping constantly. So it would be,
Well, you'd start to replay, you'd start to.
yeah.
You know, one thing, I'm not trying to put in a plug for Friends of Trees here, but one thing Friends of Trees could do is we could, since we already planted trees at St. James, those 12 tulip trees, you know, certainly we could make a contribution of trees to West Neck at the appropriate time, so.
It's also the kind of thing we could do, we have CPF money, but we could do a fundraiser, you know, people.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing that one of the candidates said they could help with fundraising.
Yeah.
Come up with fundraising ideas.
So Nostrum Parkway thing right there opposite the property right there, the dozen or so trees that you've planted, they're
Yes.
doing well.
Yes, they
Yeah,
are.
you've done, I mean, I've watched when you put them in, they seem to be doing extremely well. Those bags with the, you know, with water at the base, yeah, they do,
Yeah.
yeah.
And just on a little bit of a different note, Gordon, the plan, I guess you and Brian worked out for Dickerson Park has worked out great because we cut the lawn there on a regular basis, but it's really a nice place to go and have a picnic or just to sit and watch. So, I mean, that's another one that, you know, we're not revegetating, but we took out all the invasives, and I guess some of the neighbors there were concerned the same thing, that what the hell did you do? You stripped the land. But if you go down, I think that's one of the nicest parks on Shelter Island.
It is, although I think, I personally think that we could think of revegetating some of it, not close to the water.
Yep.
Where the seating is, but.
Yeah.
The vegetation came out, and just putting in.
Native.
Deer unfriendly
Yeah.
natives. I would like to see that happen.
Yeah. What's the next step?
The next step is, we'd like to get approval to hire one of these firms.
If we have to see the, like, we need to see the proposals.
So you have them all, or Christina has them. We got them to you, and then there's sort of a cheat sheet, which, one thing I should explain is that, and it actually is on the cheat sheet, but two of the firms actually farm out Meadow services. They don't do it themselves, and that's noted in the cheat sheet. And then two of the firms actually, the principals know how to actually do Meadows. And
Is there an addendum to the proposal with that in there, or?
it's actually in the cheat, if you look in the cheat sheet.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, that's the cheat sheet.
okay.
It says overview.
Yes.
And Gordon, just so the public knows, 10% of the 2% fund can be used for this type of stuff?
We have never come close to that.
So this would be coming out of CPF monies.
That's not taxpayer money.
Yes, this is, let me make that loud and clear.
Yeah, I wanted to make
This
sure
is
that
not taxpayer money, this is coming out of the CPF fund.
Even though taxpayers will enjoy the heck out of it.
Yes. I just want to make that absolutely clear.
Any other questions?
No, it's a very nice presentation, though.
Yeah,
Do you have a preference?
try getting it out of them.
No, I'm not going to say anything.
Okay, sorry. On the spot.
We'll discuss.
Okay.
And thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.
And again, thank you all, the CPF group, for what you do for us. Okay, at this time, we'll go around the table, then we'll open it up to the public. Peg,
I was first.
just sit there.
Oh, wait, you want to turn it the other way?
All right, BJ?
I'm just checking my calendar here to see what I did for the last week. No,
In-laws.
I had family. But we did have a CPF meeting yesterday. Again, CPF in the morning, and then working yesterday was primarily discussing what the properties need for next year to create a budget.
No.
No. And so that was the morning, that was a big part of that. And then we had an executive session, which I can't tell you about. So, and then last night we had the WMAC meeting. Still cleaning up the database, an interesting proposal from a resident on the south side of the island, which was done a little differently, Jim. He came to the WMAC with an idea, not plans, not fully drawn, because it's testing the code a little bit, for lack of a better word. So, and he got some, I think, useful feedback, maybe not feedback he wanted to hear, but useful feedback before he went all the way with a full set of designs. I like that, Jim. I don't know. I would encourage other people to try that if it's very much outside the regular thing that the.
So what was it? It was a potential applicant?
It's a guy.
It is.
Yeah.
Potential application, this is a homeowner that lives in an area down near.
On the outside.
It's a South Ferry on the outside, that with wind, tide, wake, a lot of wake action. He talked about bigger boats coming through there. It's playing havoc with some of his watercraft at his dock. It is a pre-existing non-conforming dock of 170 feet long. And he's asking for several finger-like projections off the dock to help secure the inflatable boats and some of the other boats that he has at that site with splashboards and things. It was very ambitious, got a lot of discussion. We probably spent 45 minutes on discussing this thing. Jack Costello happened to be there. It's a new concept that they're taking a look at. There was a lot of great feedback from the membership there, and alternatives. So they didn't, so I anticipate that this application, which was not in the form of an application, just an idea thrown out there, is going to go back to the drawing board, scale it down a little bit, take some of the ideas that were generated by members of the WMAC, incorporate them into a new plan, which was a little less ambitious. But again, we always get to this applications in hazardous areas. We're getting more and more requests for extraordinary, different kinds of out of the ordinary requests that we haven't seen before to accommodate docks that are in areas that take a beating from weather and from winds and wakes and things of that nature. So it was a good exchange, and everybody weighed in on it, and, we'll see what happens. BJ, first thing, we'll just pick up on that. We talked about Daniel Lord Road a little bit.
Yep.
And Bo was going to sit down with Stephen and go through,
A process.
some process there about those moorings. I mean, obviously, the physical 4x4, the posts are all landed, but now there's other things that need to be tightened up and done there. And, there needs to be a little bit greater emphasis on getting that thing done. Does need follow-up, needs coordinating with Bay Constables. And we should use, and I think it came up last night, the Condon Creek model of use it or lose it, because as we're seeing down there, of those 10 moorings that were put in and then repositioned, there were no boats on any of those 10 moorings, on the left-hand, on south side of the road.
And there's a waiting list.
And there's a waiting list. So, yeah, and so that needs, further emphasis. The Browning dock application needs a survey, so that we didn't act on that. Silverback dock application, Rob Herman was present for that, and we discussed that. And the owners are there, Oscar and Caroline, both were there representing their request for the Slatterback dock application. It needs to be, we talked about the chalking is the big thing.
Right.
So chalking is a process of going to areas that have floats in water depths that are less than 30 inches or less. So it helps to stabilize and not so that during extreme low tides, that the floating dock does not lay on the bottom of the water, and do damage, get caught and moved around. So they frame it out a little bit so that it's framed out so that the dock never really sits down. The entire floating dock doesn't sit down on it. And Costello was here and said, I've installed about 10 of them in the last decade on the east end. So it's not a very common practice. The DEC discussion came into Bob, whether we're going to evolve 30 inches or go down to 24 inches, whether we should have less, and how and the WMAC is looking for a little guidance here.
Yeah.
I think if they had it within their druthers, they'd probably feel more comfortable if they went down to 24 inches, as opposed to 30 inches, because and just discourage us and learn to say no to people. But the alternative there was, of course.
What are you talking about, 24 inches of water
Yeah,
for the floating dock?
yeah. So
What's the DEC's position on the chalk?
They're fine with
They're okay with it as long as it doesn't go below that 24.
They don't want it on the bottom.
Yeah, they don't want it on the
No,
bottom.
it makes sense to chalk, because you don't want the whole dock in the bottom. I mean, it does make sense.
So that was discussed, in length for an exceptionally long time. Again,
Was this conceptual or is it ready to apply?
he's ready to apply, and this is the dock that we said that, if he went out 125 feet rather than 100 feet, he could get to the 2.5 feet, so he wouldn't need the chalking. So in an effort to conform to keeping the maximum dock at 100-foot length,
Yeah.
he only gets out,
the alternative,
he only gets out to the 2.3 inches, a 2.3, which is not the 2.5. And that's a difference of 3 inches, that 2/10 of a
Which,
inch.
if you think about it,
Yes.
a good storm.
Yes.
And where's that bottom going to be?
Yes, you're correct.
But we have to pick a point in time.
You do. So we're going back and forth on that. They're looking at that again. The last application was the Dunn Fairbarn mooring application where they wanted to switch moorings. So the Bay Constable is always going to be research that for us this week.
There's a couple of ghost moorings.
Yes.
A database.
Yeah.
So again, Bo continues the heavy lift of
Yeah.
cleaning up the database.
So was it? Yes. It was. Yeah, it was a 29-foot length boat and a 37-foot length boat that was switching, so we wanted to make sure too, that was, was doable.
So are any of the applications going to be ready for the next month?
Maybe Wilcox Kirby from a previous meeting.
Correct.
That would probably.
Because they've been working on that.
Yeah.
John has been working on that, so that might be the only one.
And Jim, what's the process, like when you had your meeting last night and you found these weren't complete, what's the process? How do you notify, who notifies the applicant?
Well, John has been, and Christina, I guess, no, John, town clerk, okay, has been notifying them of the issues. When people are on board, they come and we encourage them to come on the Zoom, or come in person, as they did both last night.
Yeah.
We tell them right there on the spot, to take corrective action, and we'll put it on the agenda for the following month. If the information is missing, we tell them exactly what is missing, what the request for, and try to satisfy that between now and the next meeting, so that we can.
So short of doing that at the meeting, is there any way we can review it and do it before? So you don't waste the committee's time with an incomplete application?
A lot of this stuff is for discussion, though. A lot of it is splitting hairs.
I agree, Jerry.
Yeah.
We tried to do that.
I will tell
Really
you,
pushed back,
Yeah.
but it's our hope that.
It just doesn't seem fair to the applicant.
however, we did take a vote on Slaughterback, now that you mention it.
Yeah.
The vote was 6-0 to approve, but there was always the clause in there about if
Change
town code needs to be clarified and looked at, that there's nothing in there now that prevents this from happening, but we need to, for future, because this could be an ongoing problem.
And actually, the town code doesn't address design or, how many cross members in a, it doesn't
Yeah, right.
talk about that. So that's a whole discussion, maybe even part of the comprehensive plan discussion, because do we want to dictate that or not as a town?
Well, I feel like that's an engineering call.
Me too.
Like, I don't think I'd want to put my foot in that, because then I'm taking on the liability by saying you have to have X, Y, and Z, when it may no longer be appropriate down the line, depending on what your soil conditions are under the dock and how deep your piers have to go and all that. That's an engineer. That's not me.
I think if a qualified dock builder comes before us with plans and whatnot, and Rob Herman, these are experts in their field, and if they say this is okay, and yes, you might get these, once in a while, a storm that could bash this thing. Well, every dock owner takes that risk, if you ask me. Maybe the risk is a touch higher.
Build, you take on that liability.
Yeah, so, good that it's mentioned, don't get me wrong, but also maybe not a stop it, in any way for us to stop approving.
Their big thing is about them, the 7 of them, knowing what they know and their experience, putting their stamp of approval on a permit that is iffy at best, because they have questions that they don't believe it's a safe place to put a dock or to put a boat lift,
Right.
along Peconic Avenue.
Right,
They always get that. They'll approve it because there's nothing in the town code currently that prevents it from being approved, but they always have that caveat in there about, by the way, we want. And last night, Mark Ween brought up, I wrote down the note here, it said, for a comprehensive plan review about the 2.5 feet of water, whether that's something that we should adopt or whether we shouldn't go, we should go to the 24 inches, what would be comfortable with. So I'm just alerting you that they all went in on that, so.
And how's that going with the WMAC comprehensive plan?
We're waiting for their feedback,
okay, so-
because we're actually trying to do a waterways chapter in the comprehensive plan, because historically, we haven't had a chapter dedicated to our waterways, and being that we're an island, it made sense.
So the last thing that happened, and I'll pick up on the meeting because we started off on this, is BJ has been working on that portion of the WMAC and has challenged the 7 members of the WMAC to be a part of this process. John
was unsure. But the rest of the committee wanted to dig in. So what we decided to do, and I applaud BJ for offering this, because I think she was pushing for their involvement, is to take this on, section by section. We're getting up to a time of the year. We'll have additional time to be able to do these things. So Bill Garrity, all of them chimed in and said,
yes.
Let's give it a go.
Let's give it a go.
And December, frankly, for the comprehensive plan, I think if we have this by the end of December, we're good.
And that's where BJ had said, and I think they were all in agreement with that. What was the last thing? Oh, the last thing was about the new requirement, Mr. Town Attorney there, Stephen, over them having to be here so I mentioned that at the end of the meeting.
The video conference.
The video conferencing, saying how are we going to handle this in the future? I want to give you a heads up for all you people that are going to be leaving for 3, 4, 5 months going south or to the southwest, that the practice that we had last year and the year before and everything else from prior years is not going to work. You can listen, you can contribute, you can't vote. And if you can't vote, we may not have a quorum. We got to have 4 of the 7 people present for this. So they're aware of the situation.
Right.
They explained to them it's a state, not us, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I did. So that was.
Because the question was, why didn't you push back? Because, and also, well, if you got together with other towns, I think in other towns they're kind of happy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we're not, because we're a resort, a
We
seasonal.
depend on our
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Just to segue off to that point, planning board has a meeting tonight, and Stephen, is the governor's
Did we get an
ability
extension?
is it September 15th? That they can, up to September 15th, we can still attend meetings via Zoom or video conferencing.
Yes.
After September 15th.
That's my understanding.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. So they have one member who's going to be coming in via Zoom tonight, so that member can participate.
Yes,
But next time would not be able to vote.
correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
But wait,
That's going to be important for planning board.
if that member had a legitimate reason,
An extraordinary circumstance, yes. And we have to, at the next town board meeting, we're gonna have to adopt the procedures to,
Right. So
what we did was, we have the ability to
Yeah.
do it now, but now we need to adopt,
right?
So we should put it on for the next work session.
Lines how to do it, or
What?
it's all up to you?
We prepared it.
Okay.
We'll talk about the next work session.
Okay.
BJ, anything else on it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right, okay.
Anything else, BJ?
I think that's it.
Amber?
Did you want to chime in?
I was just gonna say comp plan workshop.
Oh.
Monday, the 19th at 7, and then our regularly scheduled comp plan meeting, the 27th at 6:30. So just FYI.
So when's the workshop?
The 19th at 7, so Monday night, next year, here.
I was going to talk about community house, Chafab, actually.
Yeah.
We only have this, which is the outline of a plan. We won't have the actual plan until the 23rd.
Right.
So, at some point, I would like to see, but maybe it's just me, have the comp plan look at the chapter on housing. So I don't know, like you'd want to do that at the 19th or push that to.
Not the public workshop.
So
That's really where we're hoping to get public, but yes, the next regular CHPAP.
I mean, our
26th, that's not too late,
we
is it?
have it on the 26th, and then the public hearing for that should be October 11th, right?
Yes, for the house.
So then
Yep.
we have comp plan on what, the 24th?
October now?
I mean, October.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
17th.
What kind of feedback can we accept there?
Well, I think it's just another forum for people to express their opinions. It's going to be up to Chafab to accept, and ultimately us, accept the housing plan.
Right.
But they're going to be the ones receiving in the information and working with the consultant to formulate it. So it's just another
But
opportunity.
just so I understand, the housing plan that Chafab and the consultants are working on, once we accept it, it automatically becomes part of the comprehensive.
Yeah,
Yes.
it becomes part of that housing chapter.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, the housing chapter can,
Part of, so
Yeah,
they
part
can
of.
still.
Yeah, there can be
Yeah,
other
there can
things.
be other things that are,
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Right, there's more in the comprehensive plan housing chapter than just the housing plan. There's also demographic information and all kinds of stuff. So this is one section of that chapter.
And I'm going to be participating on a League of Women Voters forum this evening at 7
Oh, it's
o'clock.
tonight,
It's tonight, yep.
but it's
And
not live. It's-
you can view it live. I'll make sure I get that link to Christina to put on the website. But it will also be available on YouTube after tonight, and then maybe we'll even have Mary Ellen upload it.
Fred Thiel is going to be there?
Yeah, so it's Fred Thiel, Tom Wolf, who's the Housing Authority guy from East Hampton, Curtis Highsmith from Southampton, also Housing Authority, and myself. We had a
What about
pre-
Tommy, Schiavone?
Nope, not just the four of us and the moderator. But we had a pre-meeting last week just to, like, understand what the format was going to be. And one of the comments just in our general conversation as we were all, chatting was that for towns that have a housing plan, or for have a comp plan, the housing plan is an amendment to the comp plan. So it is very much an integral part of the comp plan. Like it doesn't, it's an amendment, so it replaces whatever was existing in their housing plan. So Fred Thiel, who was the author of the housing plan stuff, was the one who said that. So I was like, interesting, because I know we've gotten a little bit of pushback.
We have, there's an article, online, but, we have to do what,
Yes, but I mean, I'd still would
Legally.
like the comp plan group to look at it, because, I mean, these things are all integrated, so they need to understand what's in the housing plan, and if they have something, they say, oh, wait a second, I don't know if this group has thought of this, at least that gets brought to the table for consideration.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and when we get it on the 23rd or whatever day it goes public, I will email it to everybody on the comp plan committee so that they can also read it, and then they can come and weigh in at the public work session as well. Because that, board meeting.
So we're gonna have the ability to put the League of Women Voters thing on Channel 22?
I believe so, because it's going to be, you can view it live on YouTube at CTV Southampton. So you can view it live tonight at 7, and then it will be available on YouTube afterwards. So I just have to get the proper links.
We also just put it on our, have it on Channel 22 if we could.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's
also
just
on
another,
YouTube.
yeah, it's just another
Yeah,
form. Yeah.
Because some people just don't use that.
Right, yeah. So, but it's legal in the voters of
Good.
Hampton, Shelter Island, and North Fork. We're pulling this together. And it's to talk about the referendum on the November 8th ballot. So it should be interesting.
Yeah.
I probably won't have to talk much because these guys know way more than I do.
They
So,
are amazing.
yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know why I'm.
Just make sure you remind them that it was our town attorney that said.
I want to stay dinner for that.
How was it?
It said what?
Remember that he said the plan doesn't have to be, what you're
Oh,
doing, it
yes.
has to be,
Yes.
Yeah, the plan doesn't
have to be there before the vote.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things that I think Southampton East have been experiencing is that there's been criticism that their plans are too detailed.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
like, there's a balance.
Damned if
to
you do,
find-
damned if you
Yeah,
don't.
there's a balance to be achieved in what we put
Yeah.
into our plan, because you want it to be fluid enough that we
Right.
can actually do something, but you do want to give the public enough information to know that their concerns have been addressed. So hopefully we'll strike that happy balance.
Anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Jim?
The second meeting last night was the Conservation Advisory Council. We have 7 members on there. We knew that we were going to have 2 absentees, so we were banking on 5. One is an attendance issue, as a chronic problem of attendance. And the other person was just, we didn't know. I called both lines. I couldn't get that person there, so we were not able to hear the 4 applications. I did send you a email, Jerry, on the 1 member. We just.
Wait, you had 5 people there?
We had 3.
Oh,
3 out
sorry.
of the 7, so we
Okay.
could not. So I sent off to him asking for him to step down, and just because, if we have 6,
Yeah.
all we need is 3,
Right.
and it helps us out a lot. This probably is the 3rd time this has happened in the last 2 years, so it just, to me, it's a little bit embarrassing because we had Dan and Sean on the 10 Thompson Road. They were both present. They were very good about it. We did offer some information to them about what was needed on their application, which they were thankful for, about the vegetative plan, a few other things, several different site plan conflicts. So they said they would take care of that between now and the October meeting. But there were 4 applications that we could not act on. So I did take care of that one issue for the co-chairs and notify that person that I'd like them to reconsider their membership on the committee.
Well, if they don't, we can remove them.
We can, but I'd rather do it the other way around, if we can. Deer and Tick Committee had a hunters meeting last week, September 7th. Bo Payne was there along with the chairman of the Deer and Tick, Dr. Jim Bevilacqua, and Julie Weissenberg, and myself as the liaison, along with 7 hunters. We talked initially about the flyovers, and if you were there and you walked by it and you looked at the map of Shelter Island, there were red dots all over the place on the island. There was not one spot that did not have red dots. And interesting enough, like if you zoomed in on a piece of property that had 3 red dots and you zoomed in on it, there were actually 9 or 10 deer there. So it not every dot represented a deer.
Yeah.
It represented clusters of deer. And that's what you start to see at this time. You're starting to see the clustering. So the good thing about the flyovers not only provide you with a total number of deer that you might have here, at least a very good educated guess. It demonstrates where they're located exactly. And prior to hunting season, that's advantageous to be able to design a deer management program. And there's a couple properties last year that didn't pan out for a variety of reasons, and I don't want to go throw anybody on the bus why they didn't, but they didn't.
When you say didn't pan out, means we didn't hunt. We hunted them, there was nothing there.
I could tell you,
Okay.
Because it's we've since taken corrective action on those properties. So, they are strongly recommending a 3rd flyover for 2023, which hopefully Jim will put in the budget. 4 poster, there is no change from New York State DEC, so it still requires a 150-foot buffer for bow and arrow. That's not going to change, so that doesn't change our disposition. People bring that up. When are we bringing it back? We can't bring it back until the DEC changes the regulation. Venison donation. This is a pretty interesting fact. In 6 full seasons of hunting, we have provided 16,000 pounds of venison.
Wow.
Which generates 48,000 meals. Saying you get 3 meals per pound. 48,000 meals of venison. Butchering, we have primarily 2 butchers that kind of work on this pretty much full time, especially when we get into January, February, and March, when hunting season really kind of picks up even more. Cooler is operational at Cobbett's Lane. We did have a grant application in, but it doesn't work in that cooler because hanging the deer, there's not a vertical room up and down. So for obvious reasons, we don't want to cut that deer up, too bad to fit it in that spot. Mm-hmm. So it's a godsend this time of the year. Was very little hunting going on now, if any, which leads me into this 10-day hunting opportunity in September. Bo is not prepared to open any town properties to hunters. There are too many conflicts with hikers, and the warm temperatures present major hazards for deer hunters because tick density levels are so high, particularly with deer ticks. Between late September and October, just not a great time. Mm-hmm. But the cooler is available, and but that doesn't mean that people can't hunt on private properties during that 10-day period of time.
So it's an open 10 period for anybody, any licensed hunter?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is this a state, is it the state who's opening it up early?
Yes, this is the
Okay.
state that's opening it up for those 10 days. Starts, again, it's right about now, the 10th through the 18th or something like that. But it's right in the mid part of September here. On county-owned properties, it is open to all Suffolk County hunters. It's first come, first served.
Right.
So if they're on a ferry at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and our hunters are there at 4 o'clock in the morning, guess what? But Bo works on that because you obviously don't want to turn off the people from traveling long distances coming here. So the word is out, please, if you plan on hunting this weekend, call ahead. I'll find a spot. I'll take one of our guys and put them over another spot if you've got a spot that you're looking to hunt. So that he does a great job on that. Incentives. Remember we used to provide gift cards for dicks and all that. We don't do that anymore. So we do an incentive program, but we have moved to a Visa card type of thing where the person can now go and purchase at a variety of other places rather than just one place. So it seems to work out. We have the same budget, same amount of money, but it's just handled differently. Big topic that was discussed at the end that the people here in the island would be very concerned about. It's called EHD, epizoic hemorrhoidic disease. It's a viral disease transmitted by biting minges, better known as no-see-ums or punkies. This disease is spread directly from deer to deer, and humans cannot be infected by contact with deer or from bites from these midges. This is the time of the year you're going to see it, during the warm weathers of September and early October before the first frost. Once the first frost comes and these no-see-ums are no longer, the disease seems to go away. However, last year it was estimated that we had about 25 plus deaths to deer because of the disease. We had one confirmed case that Bo handled directly, but we did find, and I won't mention areas of the island, where we found 4 or 5 deer together in clubs that all looked like they suffered from the same disease. EHD virus does not infect humans. Hunters should not shoot, handle, or eat deer that appear sick or are acting abnormally. Infected deer become lethargic and lose their appetite. They become weak and they have bloody diarrhea and they show excessive salivation. That they develop rapid pulse, rapid respiration rate, along with fever, which is why you frequently find dying deer near bodies of water. So he said, listen, homeowners, if you have a koi pond in the backyard, and you find a dead deer, it didn't drown in your koi pond. That was probably the result of EHD. Please report that to Bo Payne. Anybody that happens to suspect, a sick deer out there. Fever and edema are common to deer with EHD. Often they have swollen heads, necks, tongues, and eyelids. Deer die quickly in a couple of days after symptoms appear. It's usually dead within 48 to 72 hours. The disease is 90% fatal for white-tailed deer in the Northeast because the virus is new to us up here. In areas down south where the disease has been for decades, the deer have developed an immunity to the disease, and it is not fatal. They run a mild form of it, but they don't die from it. The deer in the Northeast are dying from it because they have no immunity built up within them.
So Jim, when you said hunters shouldn't,
Is it safe to eat the meat of a deer that, if you shot the deer and it tested positive? The answer is yes, you could eat the meat, but in this thing that I looked up, it said if you happen to see one that is very sick and everything else, the handling of the carcass and everything else is something that you should just report it. You should just report it.
It's not contagious.
It's not contagious to humans at all.
Okay.
No, not at all. And not even if you happen to eat meat no, it's not contagious in all the research. The last thing I'll tell you about it is Dr. Pat Connolly of Cornell, who is a leading researcher on EHD. He is asking all interested hunters to participate in taking blood and tissue samples for him. Healthy deer, just all harvest, not only deer that you think have EHD. So if you take a deer down, you can he'll send you a kit. Bo is trying to collect a bunch of kits, hand them to the hunters, and will automatically, especially early in the season, do a blood test and a tissue test on the deer and send it back. This will give us some type of reading on data-wise of how prevalent the disease is here on Shelter Island. So they're finding it throughout the entire East End. Bo Contacting has become a hub for dispensing and collecting samples. It's free and it's not really time consuming. It takes you all of about 5 minutes to take a blood sample and a tissue sample. They show you exactly how to do it. You put it back in the kit, you give it back to Bo, and Bo will send it back into testing. And that basically is the report from the
Sounds good.
I distributed capital planning. I said I'd do it this week, but it's old news.
Yeah.
You got all of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
And if the paper wants it, I will email you copies of that capital planning if you would like that.
Hey, do you have anything else? Comp plan? Okay, Stephen, you have anything?
No.
Dottie, anything from your office? Good, okay, open it up to the floor. Julia, anything for the report, for the papers?
Nothing for me, thank you.
All good. Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the audience, on the Zoom audience, have any questions?
Hand up from Kim, I get to see that.
No, I think that's.
See any hands?
That was
That's your
BJ's hand.
Okay, if there's no questions from the audience, I'll make a motion. We go into executive session to discuss potential land acquisition.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, so moved.